Let's be blunt, because avoiding the awkwardness is the first step toward actual clarity. Asking, how much, is less useful than asking, what makes sex safe, comfortable, and pleasurable. There isn't a single inch or number that answers this for everyone, because human bodies are built to respond, not to be measured like rulers. The vagina is a muscular, elastic canal that changes with arousal, relaxation, and context. At rest it's one thing, and when a person is aroused and relaxed it lengthens and opens. That means the real variables are not fixed anatomy but state, how relaxed you are, how aroused you are, how much lubrication there is, and how safe and trusted you feel with your partner. If you want a single takeaway, let it be this: capacity is created by care, not forced by pressure. Pain is feedback, not a performance metric. If something hurts, listen and stop or change course. Enduring pain is not a measure of love, strength, or worth, it is a signal that something needs attention. Start with context. Sex doesn't begin when bodies meet, it begins with the conversation beforehand and the tone you set together. Do you feel safe? Do you feel respected? Do you trust the person you're with to stop if you ask? Those questions matter far more than any measurement. When people rush, when consent is assumed, when there's no attention to comfort, even modest stimulation can feel overwhelming. Conversely, when someone takes time, pays attention to signals, uses gentle touch, and asks simple questions like, is this okay? Or, shall I go slower? Bodies respond by opening and relaxing. Warmth, connection, and emotional attunement change physiology. So the first rule: slow down, check in, and treat consent as ongoing, not a one-time checkbox. Arousal and lubrication are practical mechanics. Natural lubrication varies by person and by moment, by cycle, by stress level, by medication, by sleep, by hydration. Using a good water or silicone-based lubricant is not an admission of dysfunction, it's a tool that reduces friction, increases comfort, and increases the chance of pleasure. If you or your partner feel dry, use lube liberally. Don't be ashamed, practicality wins every time. Alongside lube, warm-up matters. Foreplay isn't optional, it's preparation. Kissing, touching, communicating what feels good, and building trust are how you make your body more receptive. Think of it as priming the system. Breath and relaxation are underappreciated power tools. When you tense your jaw, grip your hands, or hold your breath, your pelvic floor tightens reflexively. That makes anything feel more intense. Try simple breathing, long exhales, soft sighs, relaxed shoulders. When you release tension in other parts of your body, your pelvic floor often follows. Use your breath as a way to soften into pleasure and to communicate nonverbally when something works or doesn't. Angles and positions change where pressure lands. The pelvis is not a straight hallway, different positions change depth and sensation. If something feels too deep or uncomfortable, shift the angle rather than assuming the only solution is less. Bring knees up, tilt hips, try shallower positions, or use pillows for support. Small adjustments can make a huge difference. Partners should be curious and humble. Assume you don't know what the other person needs and be willing to experiment gently. If pain happens, don't normalize it. Chronic or recurring pain deserves attention. Common causes include not enough lubrication, incorrect angles, rushing, pelvic floor tension, or medical conditions such as infections, endometriosis, or vaginismus. A pelvic floor physical therapist can be life-changing. Seeing one is an act of strength and self-care, not a sign of weakness. Medical professionals can provide diagnosis and targeted treatments. Don't let shame keep you from care. 2 partners, your role matters more than you think. Size myths give people the idea that penetration is a solo performance measured against absurd standards. The truth is emotional intelligence, patience, and adaptability are what make someone a great partner. Ask questions, listen, pause when asked, and be eager to learn. Pleasure is an outcome of mutual attunement, not bravado. When a partner says, slower, go slower. When they say, shallower, adjust. If they say, it hurts, stop. That is not rejection, it's information. Treat it as precious. There are also societal layers that shape how people experience sex. Porn and locker room talk create unrealistic templates. Bodies vary widely, and porn rarely models communication, aftercare, or realistic pacing. Stop measuring yourself against edited fantasy. Real intimacy includes negotiation, check-ins, and pauses. It includes laughing, reorienting, and sometimes walking away to try again another day. That is normal. That is mature. That is how lasting sexual satisfaction is built. Empowerment matters. If you're the person whose comfort is the question, practice clear language. You don't need to be poetic, you need to be honest. Use simple phrases. this is too deep, a little shallower, more lube, pause for a second. Your boundaries are instructions, not obstacles. Respecting them teaches your partner how to be with you. If someone repeatedly ignores safe words or boundaries, that's a relationship red flag. Consent requires ongoing respect. There are practical tips that help create capacity. More foreplay, experimenting with positions, using lubrication, pelvic floor exercises when appropriate, practicing breathing and relaxation techniques, and seeking professional help if pain persists. Pelvic floor exercises aren't about tightening, they're about control and coordination. A trained therapist can show you how to release as well as strengthen. If there's any medical history, surgery, childbirth, chronic conditions, bring that into the conversation with your provider. Knowledge reduces fear and increases options. Aftercare is part of the contract too. After physical intimacy, check in. Ask, how are you feeling? Offer reassurance, and respect quiet. Sometimes the aftermath reveals emotional layers that weren't visible in the moment. Being present afterward reinforces safety, deepens trust, and paves the way for future intimacy. If you're worried about meeting a partner's expectations, flip the script, ask them what they can do to make things better for you. A great partner will see that as an invitation, not a criticism. If they respond with entitlement or insistence on performance, that's a mismatch. Sexual compatibility includes empathy and curiosity, not just technique. So how much can a woman take? The honest answer is, far more than myths suggest when there is care, arousal, lubrication, and consent, far less when there is pressure, fear, or rushing. The real metric is not inches but comfort, how much pleasure and trust you can build together without pain or shame. Build that and capacity follows. Pressure and silence shrink capacity. Communication and tenderness expand it. Finally, make this a life practice. Talk about sex outside the bedroom. Normalize asking for what you need. Normalize saying no. Normalize seeking help. Normalize pleasure as part of health. When you shift your thinking from performance to partnership, everything changes. You stop chasing a measurement and start growing a sex life that is sustainable, joyful, and respectful. That is the real goal. Consent, communication, and trust matter more than any measurement. The truth is simple. Sex is a negotiation between living, feeling bodies and not a competition against a ruler. Consent is the active yes that begins and continues each interaction. It is specific, informed, and reversible. Consent is not an absence of voice, it is a clear agreement. Practicing consent means asking, listening to answers, and honoring them. When partners treat consent as ongoing, they transform sex into a cooperative process rather than a performance. Communication follows consent and turns private experience into shared information. People vary in arousal patterns, comfort with depth, and what sensations feel pleasurable. These are subjective facts, not flaws. Talking about them removes guessing and reduces harm. A quick pre-intimacy check-in, 2 minutes to say what feels good and what feels off, changes outcomes. During sex, brief verbal cues or nonverbal signals guide adjustments. Afterward, a short debrief helps refine what to try next time. Make communication normal rather than awkward and you lower the threshold for honesty when it matters most. Trust is the soil where consent and communication grow. Trust is built by small consistent acts, pausing when asked, not mocking vulnerability, and owning mistakes. When trust exists, partners can experiment without fearing shame. They can share fantasies, try new techniques, and be honest about fear or pain. Without trust, people tense up, and muscles clamp down. That physiological response narrows tolerance and makes penetration feel harsher. Trust reduces guarding and increases relaxation, which in turn increases capacity for pleasure. Boundaries are part of consent and should be treated as helpful data. A boundary is not a refusal of intimacy but a clear signal about how to proceed. Respecting boundaries teaches partners how to make sex pleasurable for both people. They enable mutual curiosity instead of unilateral demand. If someone says, "I need more foreplay," the response should be curiosity and action, not impatience. If someone asks for a pause, the response should be gratitude for the information and immediate care. These responses, repeated, build a pattern of safety that makes future vulnerability easier. Practically, couples can create rituals that make communication habitual. A brief check-in, a chosen safe word, or a nonverbal signal can be a scaffold. Normalize using lubrication and experimenting with positions, don't wait until discomfort becomes pain. Pelvic floor relaxation exercises and breathing techniques can be shared practices that improve comfort for both partners. Education matters. Learn the basics of anatomy, the role of arousal, and how stress affects sensation. Professional help. sex therapists, pelvic floor physical therapists, and medical providers, are resources to reduce uncertainty and transform pain into solvable problems. Culture often sells myths about size, endurance, and performance. These myths pressure people into measuring worth by physical metrics rather than relational skill. Replacing those myths requires shifting attention to mutual attunement. Pleasure is not a solitary stat to beat, it is a relational outcome that depends on listening and adapting. Partners who value process over measurement invest in communication skills, and those skills pay dividends across the relationship. Consent reframes the idea of boundaries as tools rather than obstacles. A boundary such as, not tonight, not that depth, or, I need more foreplay, is not a rejection of intimacy, it is a calibration toward what creates pleasure and safety. When boundaries are spoken and honored, they guide partners toward practices that enhance responsiveness. Communication about boundaries can be practical and specific without being clinical. Talk about timing, desired touch, phrases that mean, pause, and what both people enjoy. Trust is built through repetition and small acts of reliability. Showing up for a conversation, apologizing and adjusting after a misstep, and checking in during intimacy are small behaviors that add up. The presence of trust allows for honest experiments. Trying a new position, using a toy, or exploring a different rhythm becomes less risky when partners know they can stop without judgment. Trust also permits vulnerability. A person who trusts that their partner will not shame them for an honest reaction can relax and engage more fully. That relaxation changes everything physiologically. Practically, couples can embed consent and communication into their sexual life with simple rituals. Start with a check-in before intimacy. 2 minutes is enough to ask, how are you feeling, and, what do you want tonight? Use safe words or signals for when something is too intense. Normalize using lube and adjusting positions as routine rather than emergency fixes. Pause occasionally to ask, is this okay, rather than assuming consent is timeless. Debrief afterward, ask what worked and what could be different next time. Educational resources and health professionals can support better communication. Books, workshops, and therapists can teach language, techniques, and the science behind arousal and pain. Pelvic floor physical therapists, sex therapists, and gynecologists can help translate subjective experiences into actionable steps when pain or dysfunction appears. Seeking help is not an admission of failure but an intelligent response to a complex human system. It signals that both partners value sustainable pleasure over short-term performance. A practical point is that consent and communication reframe how partners deal with myths like, bigger is better, or, pain equals proof. These cultural stories are often loud but misleading. They can pressure people into dangerous territory where measurement becomes a proxy for worth. Replacing those myths with a focus on mutual attunement dismantles the shame and competition that sabotage intimacy. Partners who adopt a learner's stance, asking, experimenting, and adjusting, become more skilled lovers than those who rely on ego or comparisons. Curiosity beats bravado. Small questions like, would you like more pressure? Or, is this depth okay? Reset the dynamic from performance to collaboration. Over time, the accumulation of these small adjustments builds a sexual vocabulary unique to the couple, making intimacy smoother and more reliable. Consent, communication, and trust also protect dignity. They prevent coercion disguised as persuasion, and they create space for autonomy. Autonomy is not isolation, it is the freedom to contribute to a shared experience with clear boundaries. When autonomy is honored, both partners can engage from a place of generosity rather than obligation. That shift changes the quality of desire and often increases mutual pleasure. Finally, remember that measuring intimacy by inches or duration is a distraction from what actually makes sex meaningful. The metric that matters is whether both people feel respected, safe, and excited to be with each other again. Those outcomes arise from tiny, repeated choices to ask, to listen, and to act in service of another person's comfort. This ongoing practice of consent and communication is what transforms fleeting encounters into a source of connection and care.